Hi, my name is Deanne Barr, and I write books of sex, suspense, and satire. My newest release is Saving Grace, a psychological thriller. It is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, iBooks, wherever you purchase your great new reads. The reviews are great. I'm so grateful, and I hope you'll pick up a copy. Today on Author Groupie, I'm interviewing Nev March. Nev March. She has written a fantastic book called Murder in Old Bombay. I had the pleasure of reading an advanced reader copy, and I just love the book. And she's going to talk about the research involved in it, and she's going to take us back into back in history to tell us a little bit about India in the late 1800s. So sit back, relax. Please, if you haven't voted yet, be sure to vote. Do your civic duty. Wear your mask over your nose, please. It doesn't work otherwise. And as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Nev March, who I realize she reminded me that we have met in the past. So after a long career in business analysis in 2015, Nev March returned to her passion, which was fiction writing. And she now teaches creative writing at Rutgers Osher Institute. She is also a board member of Shine and Inspire, a nonprofit that we'll ask her a little bit about later. A Parsi Zoroastrian herself, and I say herself because the people in her novel are of that persuasion. She lives in New Jersey with her husband and two sons. Murder in Old Bombay is her debut novel, which won the Minotaur Books Mystery Writers of America Award for Best First Crime Fiction. So she's like royalty. Welcome to Author Groupie.
Thank you. I'm so excited. And thank you, Dawn.
Well, it's great to see you again.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah. You went from something fairly dull and mathematical, I would think, or at least analytical, to something literary. Usually people believe those two are polar opposites. So how did business analysis help your writing?
Yeah, I've always had interest in writing. I started writing short stories at 11, and I've had a few short stories published when I was younger. But being able to do math and having an interest in economics, that sort of felt like the career to do. And then I went in and got a few degrees and so on. But although the work I did for 22 years was data analysis, business analysis, and so on, market research and marketing did give me a little bit of that right brain activity. I have to admit that problem solving was it's very left brain. It's very quantitative. It's focused on facts. You're just basically trying to not have too many opinions. You're trying to focus on facts and do synthesis. But what I found is that it's enormously helpful to have that kind of brain when you're doing research, because you're assessing, am I going to use this, or is this tangential? And the ability to just narrow down, that kept me from going all over the place and just surfing day after day after day.
Yeah, also comes in very handy when writing your synopsis, I've learned.
To some extent, I still struggled with a synopsis. I struggled with this query letter. I struggled with the pitch like everybody else.
Yeah.
But being able to just keep very organized, I think just having a commercial background helped me, organize who I was pitching, who I was querying, what I had sent when, just those basic skills really came in handy.
Terrific. Well, have you always, I know you said you've been writing since you were young. Was it always mystery? And why or why not?
It's all over the place. I wrote, I guess, short stories. I tried a lot of historical work. I've had 4 unpublished manuscripts before this one, and they were all 4 were historical. A couple of them might be even considered romance, historical romance, perhaps. I did a lot of short stories that were either, noir or creepy or just, a little wild and crazy. And I don't know that I would publish necessarily in those genres. What felt very natural for me was history, just writing historicals. And so it's no surprise that the first time I attempted a mystery, firstly, it was much harder than I had expected. A burden of just doing a lot of intricate plotting and outlining was really quite a lot. But the first time I did that, and it had to be historical mystery, right? So really very pleased how well it's been received so far.
Wonderful. So now, what attracted you to the Minotaur contest? If you can tell the viewers a little bit about that. I know a little bit about it, but they may not. And how
Yeah.
has that success helped your career by winning it?
Oh, it's been marvelous. It has launched my career. It's literally set me up to at least, get a start, get some voice out there. So the contest itself is not very highly publicized. I found it on the MWA, the Mystery Writers of America webpage, and I was looking at Edgar Award winners because I put them on my list to read. And then I came across this little contest for unpublished writers and said, oh, well, they want a full manuscript. I have one. And it was a humongous length at the time. It was 138,000 words. I do not recommend that to anybody. It should be close to 100,000 words if you're going to do that. But I was incredibly lucky. The reader who got my book loved it. She actually reached out to me on Facebook way afterwards, after it was announced and everything. But that, despite the horrible length, it resonated for her, and she put it up for nomination. And that award, when I received it, I went, Minotaur, wait, when did I do that? Because it was like a lottery to me. I thought I had such low chance of winning it. I'd pretty much recorded it in my list and said, all right, we'll see. And so when it actually came through, I was over the, just, walking on air. It was just marvelous. And the team has been incredibly good. So MWA has been very supportive. I'm part of their team. I, participate in whatever I can. And then Minotaur is actually part of St. Martin's Press, which is part of Macmillan, and that's a wonderful team to publish with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. So I'm going to go back to your personal life a little, and then we'll go back to the book. Since it was in your bio, what is the Rise and Shine not-profit?
Yeah, so the Shine and Inspire is a very small local nonprofit that essentially, it's like Make-A-Wish. It grants people's wishes, and it could be anything that they're asking for, but we do ask that the recipient pay it forward in some way to the community. So in the application, we'll grant wishes. We'll say some people have asked for. We just granted the request to someone that had been homeless for 6 years and finally got an apartment, and she was looking for beds for her children. And I read that and I went, we're going to help this person. She's not asking for a bed for herself. They're on the floor. And she wants a bed for her children. Of course, we got them beds. And then as a paid forward, she's doing something for other people in the community. She's holding wellness talks, and it's part of an academy that her children go to, and she's offering free counseling for the parents. So it's amazing how people, the things that they need, you would think would be fairly basic, but it doesn't take much, but at the right time, that help can be wonderful. And then we offer mentoring. We'll offer them guidance counseling in terms of career progression. We really give them a lot of support.
That sounds fantastic. I hope that COVID hasn't put too much of a dent in it.
It's been tough. We've had to cancel all our fundraisers.
Oh, wow.
We've had no choice with that, but we've continued to serve. We help the food pantry. We have, and we've got recipients asking for all kinds of things because right now people are really hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a wonderful, it sounds like a wonderful organization. I'm going to come back to your book now. Can you give viewers a quick synopsis of Murder in Old Bombay? I was lucky enough to read it for an ARC. It is wonderful, but tell them a quick synopsis of what it's about.
Happy to. So this is a murder mystery set in colonial India, Bombay during the British Raj. And it's a murder mystery, but it's also a bit of an action adventure. It's got a love story embedded in there. And then there are some deeper themes of racial discrimination, and there's a feminist thread running through it as well. So the book is about the death of two young Parsi women, and the book is based on a real crime. It really happened, but it's an unsolved mystery to date. We still don't know really what happened. So essentially, I have a veteran recovering from wounds, and he's in hospital, and he's a fan of Sherlock Holmes. So when he starts reading about these two girls who died in the middle of the day, in broad daylight, they fell from a university clock tower. And you would imagine such a place would be very, very busy and have plenty of witnesses, but there's no resolution. Apparently, someone has been held for the crime, but the person was acquitted. And so Captain James Agnihotri, who's a young veteran, and he's a fan of Sherlock Holmes, he decides, okay, I'm going to apply those methods to solve the mystery. And when he decides to approach the widower, for an interview, because he's looking for his next career, Adi Framji essentially recruits him to investigate the crime, and that leads to all kinds of shenanigans. So as he hunts for clues, he goes to various parts of India, and he has all these adventures and travels, and he gets derailed a whole number of times, but he keeps at it.
What I think is amazing about the book is that it takes you to a part of history I don't think a lot of people know a lot about, at least not in the US. They may know about it in India, and they certainly probably know about it in England, but not here. And it's wonderful that now that there's so much more of a focus on diversity, that you get to read about, parts of history like this. I'm just curious, did you know about this murder, these murder suicides long ago, or is it something you researched and found?
Now, I knew about this because as a teenager, whenever I wanted to do something a little ambitious, I'd get this little code, remember the Godrej girls. And that was a short form in our community for be careful, women aren't really safe. And now it's pretty common. Everybody's heard about, India being almost like the rape capital of the world. But you didn't talk about such things in earlier generations. The only way that you would warn people might be that kind of code word. So I thought it was something that had just happened, maybe 5 years ago. And then I learned it's something that even at that time, it was 90 years old. That mystery, that crime, that mystery had happened 90 years ago, but people kept it because it sat under our skin, I guess. People were so, they mourned the family, they mourned the girls that long.
Did you have to go back to India to do any research?
I did indeed, yeah. I went to the Rajabai Tower, which is in the middle of Bombay University. It is closed to the public, so don't try to go there. You can look at it from outside. It's a beautiful Gothic tower, and it does keep the time. It does tell the time. It has a chime that goes every quarter hour. But I got special permission to go upstairs. So it was blistering hot, 95 degrees in the shade kind of day. And I had the escort of a lady guard. Mind you, again, there are these, you didn't want to be up there alone with a man, a stranger. You wanted a lady guard. So even in this day and age, it was very nice. I got a sweet girl who opened up the door and said, all right, I'll come up with you. But when we got inside, it was blistering hot. It was closed. A lot of the air gaps have been closed over, and it was suffocating, and I was claustrophobic in there. And we got 200 steps up there. The only thing that kept me going, Dawn, is that I thought, okay, no one's behind me. If I really hate this, I can turn around and go away. If someone had been behind me, I don't think I could have done it.
Yeah.
All the way to the top, and then there's a lock there. So I said, all right, do you have the key? And she said, they didn't give me the key.
Oh, no.
So we got all the way up there, and I realized why, because people are afraid that individuals will get up there and commit suicide. So to protect you from yourself, you're not allowed up there.
Wow. I saw a picture of the tower on your website, so it looked beautiful. And if people want, your website will be at the end of this video if people would like to check out the notes and the pictures. Curious, there were so many references to Sherlock Holmes in the book. Was Conan Doyle a great influence to you?
Absolutely. So my mom used to read us from the collected works of Conan Doyle. And so we, three of us, well, my siblings and myself, loved to listen to the Speckled Band and the, Tale of the Baskervilles, the Hound of the Baskervilles, and all the stories. In fact, the Sign of Four has a Indian theme running through it. There's there's supposed to be this mystery of the mutineers and so on embedded in that story. So
Wow.
Sherlock Holmes is very we were very fond of his stories. And of course there's the my wand you know reference. The Afghan war is where Watson is supposed to be injured in the Afghan war. It's like in the first few pages of a study in Scarlet. And so I
Uh,
wove that into my book as well.
Great. Demi, did the plot change while you were writing the book?
Yes, absolutely. So what I intended to write and what I ended up having here in the published novel are two quite different things. The book I wanted to write was, a clever little mystery like Dame Agatha Christie or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but that is not what happened. So some of the choices I made early on were to make the main detective, Captain James Agnihotri, that very name, right? I chose a name for him that shows that he's Anglo-Indian. James being very British, and Agnihotri is an Indian name. It's a Hindu name and a Brahmin name. So the juxtaposition of that first and last name puts him in a category which in those days would have been shunned. There was a lot of discrimination. People did not like mixing of races. Mixed race person would have been called all kinds of names. And so that gave him a backstory almost immediately. But it was more than that because I chose to make him mixed race so that he could be present in all these different social contexts, in these different landscapes, in different places. Having some British upbringing or just being a British officer, he would have been able to work in the military setting, but also in high society because you had some white in you. You could be part of that elite group. But he also has this Indian side of him. He speaks all these languages, and then he likes to travel around in disguise. So you have him in all these different settings because he can meld in there. And it's actually based on a couple of real life characters, historical characters. So the book just changed once I had him in there. You had these discrimination situations, and then also I think the piece that surprised me was how often he would come up against something that had to do with harm to women. Of course, the plot is about two women who are victims, but even the ancillary characters, every now and then there would be a little situation where he, even being a Victorian male, realizes this isn't fair, this isn't right. And so I didn't know I was doing all this editorializing. It kind of organically grew and it turned into an epic. It was not a
Yeah.
neat little short story anymore.
Yeah, I have to say that when I started reading it, I thought it would be a mystery, and to me, it seemed much more like literary fiction than a mystery. And I have to also say that to me, your voice was almost like another character because you know how setting can be a character.
Yes.
Your voice was a character because it fits so well in the narrative. I mean, there's no other way it could have been written.
Thank you. There isn't. There's a certain formality about the era
Yeah.
and about the character, and it's written in the first person. And even though James Agnihotri is he's a young man, he's brought up in a certain way that sort of fit that style of writing. I have to admit that some of the other pieces I've done, not in this book, they have a younger voice. I did a piece on gamers, just a mystery, a short story that had to do with gamers. And my sons, so I use my sons all the time as my market research. They said, "Are you sure you wrote this?" They weren't sure mom's passing off friends, younger friends' work, for their critique. I said, no, I wrote that. I've been listening to you guys talk.
So that just found, I thought that was interesting, the voice of it, but I also thought it was interesting how much discrimination there was between, for us it might be, well, everybody there is Indian, but there's so many different sects and people thinking different things about each other and not really understanding each other, and that was very interesting as well.
Yeah. The caste system is a huge part of Indian society. It was then, it still is, despite a lot of effort to try and equalize. But it's, religious groups and subgroups and even subgroups, believe it or not. Within the Brahmins, there is a hierarchy of groups within that sector. And then, of course, way at the bottom, Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi was all about trying to uplift the untouchables, the bottom rung of society. And the crimes against them still go on today. I read them in the news and it breaks my heart.
I always think it's something special when you can read a book and learn. While you're enjoying the story, you're really learning about another culture and another time. So it really worked for me on that level. Which historical characters did you include in your novel?
Yeah, so there is an actual, Ardeshir Godrej is an actual person who is someone I admired tremendously. I modeled Adi Framji on that character. So although he's not named with the proper name of his, that he has in real life, the family of that original inventor is very much present. And in fact, they run one of the largest conglomerates in the world, if not in India, Godrej Enterprises. But that founder, Adi Godrej, I read a couple of biographies, about him, and he's amazing. He lost his bride of 1 year. They only married a year. He lost that bride to this crime, and he was only 22 years old. And I go, how does a child really, just a young person like that, how does a boy recover from losing the love of his life? He never remarried, this guy. And how do you recover? So he's just been, been in my mind. And so as I read more about him, I realized a guy like that might have hired a private detective. And now this part is entirely speculative, but he could have hired probably somebody who had the chops, like an army officer, to figure this out for him and get him closure so he could go on with his life. He went on to found 17 separate enterprises and businesses that are industries. He created industries for India. So I have an enormous amount of admiration, obviously, but that was a real person in the book. And then some of the other characters are based on individuals that really existed, but I've used pieces of historical characters in them.
And then some of your own family history is in the book as well.
Indeed, yeah. So my family had this book that we've hidden for about 150 years. It was written by my grandmother's grandfather, and he was a messman, so a cook in the British Army, and he was an eyewitness during the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. So he wrote a Gujarati autobiographical poem, and it's 150-year-old Gujarati. So although my grandaunt had it printed, we really couldn't read it. Nobody could translate it. So in 2005, I had a lady translate page by page, painstakingly, and we finally read, the autobiography of my ancestor, and I was horrified because it contradicted a lot of what we considered, the common understanding of the Sepoy Rebellion. We were always told the mutineers were killed trying to escape, things like that. And the things that my ancestor had written were far different, very, very vivid, and very cruel. And there was cruelty on both sides. So anyway, that became the heart of the secret buried in my story. So I'm not going to tell you any more for spoilers.
I don't want to tell anybody the secret.
Yeah, I use that, and
But how cool is that?
Yeah, it's been, it's been a wonderful use of it. On the first page, I actually have a poem, a part of the poem translated from Vejanji, from his autobiographical poem.
Wow. So tell me something. What was the most difficult part of writing the novel? I see the pictures of your sons behind you. I would think that maybe spreading your time between being mom and being an author might be difficult. What was the hardest part for you?
The hardest part. So this particular um, novel hijacked me. It really did. For those 4 months in 2017, it was hard for me to remember to eat. I barely slept, and even when I slept, I was dreaming about it. Uh,
Wow.
and yet I couldn't wait to get back to it. So I was, if there's a way of saying I was addicted, I think this is, about as strong an addiction that I'm capable of. It was literally not able to do anything else, barely functional other than writing, and it hijacked me.
Yeah.
The second go around, and after that, I've gotten a little bit more control over managing to get balance in my life. But the hardest part for me was self-doubt, because no matter how beautifully the things in my head were coming out so well, and I just couldn't, I grappled with trying to capture that in words. And I kept reading it over and saying, this doesn't do it. This doesn't do it. And that was hard.
But you did such a beautiful job.
Thank you. I'm glad something worked.
It's beautiful. I mean, because I have people who say, your work isn't lyrical. And I'm like, well, what is lyrical? I didn't quite understand until I read your book. And I said, oh, now I understand. No, my work is not lyrical, but hers is.
Oh my God. That is such a compliment. I don't know that I planned to make it anything, it was just trying to capture the scenes and the places I had been, and these some of them are from my memory, some of them are I don't know, miraculously sort of bubbled up in my head. I used a lot of research. I used a lot of pictures, a lot of original documents. I read 5 books by Cornelia Sorabji, who was India's first lady lawyer. And she's written autobiographical books as well. So there's a lot of, the real way that people spoke, the words they
Yeah.
used. And maybe some of that just came alive in my head. So I'm trying to figure out where this came from.
Well, for me, it was like things like a waterfall of pain. Just as a writer, I will see what you're doing, whereas other people might not appreciate, or they might, but I'm like, wow, why didn't I think of that? That's such a beautiful way of putting that. So yeah, I was looking at a lot of the descriptions that you used and how lovely and different they were. So congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I have to admit, some of that I have to give credit where credit's due. And my critique group, we meet every week, and we have for the last 4 years. They went through chapter by chapter. So I have 70 very short chapters, which means that they were with me for 70 weeks.
Wow.
And they were tough on me. They was like, nope, this is a boring verb, or you haven't described this well, or come on, everybody uses that. So I have to hand it to them. They really pushed me to write differently and to write in engaging language.
Yeah, critique groups are invaluable. I love mine, and I totally get what you're talking about. So you alluded to the next book. What are you working on next?
Yeah, I am, I say about a week away from finishing it. I have the same characters, or same 2 characters, but this time this is a pair that has been pulled into or involved in an anarchist plot to blow up the World's Fair.
Wow.
So the stakes are higher. And I realized that 1893, a lot of things were going on at that time that are happening today. And that the terrorists of the day of that time were the anarchists. In fact, one of them shot President McKinley in 1901. But the whole decade prior to 1901 was filled with these bomb plots and assassinations and things like that. And where it came from was a huge social unrest because of unfairness, because of entrenched interests that didn't allow democracy to work. And we see some of that happening today. where you have
Yes.
social unrest, because if the
Yes.
system doesn't change, people get very frustrated, very unhappy, and desperate. And so you have social unrest. So I had this young couple as my protagonists, and they're trying to obviously stop the disaster that's looming, but they are also pulled into the conspiracy, into the intrigue, because who can you trust is always a good question. And
Yeah.
to some point at some point you realize that maybe these people are doing bad things have a good, they believe they have a good reason. And so that's
Yeah.
always very interesting to me. In fact, in Murder in Old Bombay, the actual villains have a very noble goal. They're just going about it in a horrible way.
Yeah.
So sometimes the goal may be there, but the means matter.
The moral ambiguity.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear a few pages from Murder in Old Bombay. If you'd like to read them, I will switch the view.
I'll be happy.
There you go.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm going to read the first 2 pages. The Widow's
Wonderful.
Letter. Yeah. The Widow's Letter. Pune, February 1892. I turned 30 in hospital, in a quiet, carbolic scented ward with little to read but newspapers. Recuperating from my injuries, a slow and tedious business, I had developed an obsession with a recent story. All of India was shocked by the deaths of 2 young women who fell from the university clock tower in broad daylight. The more I read about it, the more this matter puzzled me. 2 well-to-do young women plunged to their deaths in the heart of Bombay, a bustling city under the much touted British law and order. Some called it suicide, but there seemed to be more to it. Most suicides die alone. These ladies hadn't, not exactly. 3 men had just been tried for their murder. I wondered, what the hell happened? Major Stephen Smith of the 14th Light Cavalry Regiment entered the ward, empty, but for me, ambling as one accustomed to horseback. Taking off his white bit helmet, he mopped his forehead. It was warm in Pune this February. I said, "Hello, Stephen." He paused, brightened, and handed me a package tied in string. "Happy birthday, Jim. How do you feel?" The presents I'd received in my life I could count on one hand. Waving him to the bedside chair, I peeled the brown paper back and grinned at the book. Stephen had heard me talk often enough about my hero. "The Sign of 4, Sherlock Holmes." He nodded at the newspapers piled about my bed. "Interested in the case?" Seen this?" I tapped the Chronicle of India I'd scoured these past hours. Trial of the century, they called it. Blighters were acquitted. Outside, palm trees swished in a warm tropical gust. He sat, his khaki uniform stark in the whitewashed ward, smoothing a finger over his blond mustache. "Been in the news for weeks. Court returned a verdict of suicide." I scoffed. "Suicide, bollocks." Smith frowned. Why ever not? "The details don't line up. They didn't fall from the clock tower at the same time, but minutes apart. If they'd planned to die together, wouldn't they have leapt from the clock tower together? And look here, the husband of one of the victims wrote to the editor." I folded the newspaper to the letter and handed it over. It read, "Sir, what you proposed in yesterday's editorial is impossible. Neither my wife Bacha nor my sister Pilu had any reason to commit suicide. They had simply everything to live for. Were you to meet Bacha, you could not mistake her vibrant joie de vivre. She left each person she met with more than they had before. No, sir, this was not a woman prone to melancholia as you suggest, but an intensely beautiful and fun-loving beauty. Kind in her attention to all she met, generous in her care of elders, and admired by many friends. Sir, I beg you do not besmirch the memory of my dear wife and sister with foolish rumors. Their loss has taken the life from our family, the joy from our lives. Leave us in peace. They are gone, but I remain. Sincerely, Adi Framji, February 10th, 1892. As Smith finished reading, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and got up, or tried to, but the room did a dizzy whirl. I lurched, cursed, and grabbed for the bed and missed. Smith hollered, "Orderly," and scrambled over. They got me a bed, but it was a struggle. I'm not a small man. Take it slow, pal, Smith said, his expression odd, as if I'd sprouted horns while he wasn't looking. All right, I muttered to the orderly, a stocky Sikh in a grey turban and hospital uniform, who tended to fuss overmuch. Sahib has not been well for many months, the man assured me. Bollocks, had it been months? Only a few weeks, surely? I recalled feeling numb from cold, a fog of confusion, unfamiliar faces that came and went. Damn it, Jim, said Smith, wincing. We've got to talk about the frontier, the Afghans, Karachi. Do we? I asked. A drum began to pound in my head. I lay back and pressed the base of my palm to the aching pulse above my ear.
Very nice. So that was great. Really enjoyed. And I think if you go out, the book comes out November 10th.
Murder in Old Bombay, yes.
Yeah, so it's about 2 weeks. It's available for pre-order now.
It is.
Please go out and you won't be sorry. Go and get a copy. It is just a beautifully lyrical book. Thank you for joining me. I've really enjoyed seeing you again.
Likewise. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
And please, please, please stay safe.
You too. God bless.
Thank you.
Over the river to the city far from home. Toll booth takes my mind.